Hey, welcome to the Yarn and Yarns YouTube channel. My name is Angela and you can find me on Instagram and Ravelry as Rainbow Ange. Here on the Yarn and Yarns channel you can find me chatting all about my adventures in knitting, crochet, spinning, sometimes a little bit of sewing, anything fibre and crafty related really. I also own a small yarn shop and you can find an Instagram account and a Facebook page for my business, which is Yarn and Yarns, the same as the YouTube channel. We're based in South Wales, just outside of Cardiff in the UK, and I also sometimes have segments chatting about what's going on in the shop and just anything interesting that might have occurred as a result of running that shop. So I wanted to say a very big welcome back to anyone who is joining me again. I really appreciate anyone who has found the channel and returns time and time again to watch the videos, and also a very big welcome to anyone who is new and is finding us and enjoying the videos. I really appreciate the time that you spend with me. I've had quite a few new subscribers over the last few weeks, so we are steadily crawling towards that 200 subscriber mark. I haven't done one of these videos for about a month. I think it's been a month exactly since I uploaded a video. From the time that I'm recording this, it's actually New Year's Eve here. So you'll see probably several videos popping up on the channel over the course of the next couple of weeks of me wearing this same outfit. Because I'm trying to get a lot of recording done this morning. I'm wearing my Harriet cardigan, which is knit from West Yorkshire Spinners in the Wensleydale Gems fleece collection, which I knit earlier on in 2017. So today I am going to take you through some finished objects, some works in progress, and talk to you a little bit about some of my plans for 2019, although not in huge detail on that front. So we'll get stuck in with finished objects. All of my finished objects and works in progress today are knitting, but in the coming videos, when we get into the new year proper, I have plans afoot to try and include a knitting segment, a crochet segment and a spinning segment in every episode. I've not been very good at doing that of late. Knitting has kind of dominated, so I want to try and spread my time a little bit and share the love between some of those other crafts that I also enjoy. Anyway, back to finished objects. I have 3 here to show you, and I also have a couple of segments that I recorded in the past over December to slot in. As I say, December was a bit of a strange month. I tried to do Vlogmas, but there was a week or so that I didn't record because I fell ill, and then right at the very end of the month, the last few days, I didn't manage either. We had family visiting and I just didn't want to be recording and editing and stuff all the time. So my Vlogmas this year was a little bit of a fail, but hey, that's the way it goes sometimes. So I think I'll put in first the footage of the finished objects that I recorded earlier in the month. I had to watch back my last sort of full video, which I think was entitled Moose Talk, to remind myself what I chatted about in that episode. When you're doing the sort of vlogging every day, things tend to merge, and as I say, I was rubbish at recording proper videos in December, so yeah, I had to remind myself, and I promised that I would show you the crazy little hat that I was making for a dog, which was a commission. So I have some footage of that, and I also made a lovely hat for one of my customers. So here follows footage of those 2 finished objects. As promised in my last video, I am going to show you, before it goes off to its new home, the dog hat. I know, crazy. Project number 101 on the list of crazy things that I get asked to make. The pattern I was using is from Lucky Fox Knits, and it's just called Dog Hat, and I have found this. It's available on Etsy for anyone who may also have a small dog and want to make a jolly hat for it. And here it is. I don't know how well, so that's kind of the side view. So I put a little pom-pom on, and obviously neck goes in here, and this is dog face. Woof woof, woof woof, woof woof woof. Stop doing that. I knit mine on a 2.5mm needle, high sharps, and I use the West Yorkshire Spinners Signature 4-ply. Can't get my words, I'm distracted by my finger puppet dog. West Yorkshire Spinners Signature 4-ply in the KN colour way. Yeah, not too much else to say about this. The pattern actually calls to be knit on a 2.75mm needle, but it's held double with mohair. So the suggested yarns for this pattern are Shibui Silk Cloud and Shibui Staccato. Now, anyone who has ever purchased a skein of Shibui knows that that's quite an investment. So because we weren't holding yarns and we weren't doing any sort of mohair sort of shenanigans, I just went for a 2.75, and I think this will be fine. It's for a mini dachshund sausage dog. So yeah, it was actually quite a fun pattern to knit. There are a couple of bits in the pattern. It is a paid for pattern, as I say, available on Etsy. And actually, if you go to Lucky Fox Knits, if you are the type of person who enjoys dressing up their dog, there are quite a few cute little patterns on there. There was one that I particularly was struck with, which was like a little hat with some antennae knit in yellow and black to make a little bee costume for your dog, if you were so inclined. Anyway, there were a couple of bits in the pattern that were slightly vague, but I mean, it's a fairly easy shape. So yeah, there wasn't too much to work out. Knit sort of this long piece first, and then you pick up and knit on the neck afterwards, and then obviously add a little pom-pom at the end if you so choose. So yeah, that is it, my Lucky Fox Knits dog hat. I have another finished object for you that will be going off to its new home probably today. I have been knitting a lovely hat for the husband of one of my customers, and oh, it's turned out beautifully. I haven't blocked it, so it's got a bit of a funny kind of shape at the top, but that will definitely block out because I have knit one of these hats before and it looks good on. I'll try it on for you. So it's a nice snug fit beanie style hat, and the pattern is by the very super talented hat maker Woolly Wormhead. I'm sure most of you will have heard of Woolly. She's very prolific hat designer, and she uses all sorts of fun techniques. Her patterns are always really nice, and I've knit one of these before. I knit one for James a few years ago. This version is made from Croft Shetland tweed yarn, and it's this beautiful yarn with flecks of rust and blue shot through it. Okay, I think that's probably quite colour accurate around there. It is showing on my screen as such anyway. So yeah, it was a really quick knit. It took me, when did I cast it on Saturday, cast it off on Monday evening. Love this version in this colourway. I'm very tempted to make one of these for myself. It's so nice and cosy. This yarn is lovely too. Let me go and grab a skein of the yarn just to show you. So this is the yarn. This isn't the colourway I use. The colourway I use is called Stony Breck. This particular one is called Mossbank, but this is what the yarn looks like. It's the Croft Shetland tweed from West Yorkshire Spinners. It comes in a lovely 100g hank. It's 100% wool, and yeah, it's a really good price point. It's like £8.50 for 100g of pure Shetland Island wool, dyed in some fantastic colours. They've recently brought out a solids range to complement this tweedy range too. So yeah, it's lovely British yarn. My first time working with this yarn, and I will definitely be knitting with it some more because it is gorgeous. I knit the pattern on a 40cm circular needle. I used 4.5. The original dark pattern is knit in a double knit yarn, but I just upped my needles. I cast on for the medium size. It's fairly nice sort of stretchy rib, and then this one's worked out fine. This is definitely, I would say, on the finer side, a light Aran rather than a sort of really thick sturdy Aran. So yeah, it's definitely worked out pretty well. As you can see, there's plenty of stretch, so I think no matter if you have a giant head or not, you would definitely not really have to make any adjustments to the dark pattern to make it fit in with this yarn. I certainly didn't. To the objects that I have in front of me, and first off I have a pair of socks, and these are the pumpkin pie socks. I don't have my blockers to hand, but they have been washed and blocked. However, they've been folded up since. I have been trying to keep these nice and pristine to show off here on my video, but I'm excited that I will be able to get to put these on my feet and keep my toes nice and warm. So these are the pumpkin pie socks, as I mentioned. This lovely self-striping yarn is from Deb of Down Sheepy Lane, and I purchased this at the Knit Tea Retreat back in October, which was a local to me retreat in Cardiff, organised by Jenny, who is Owl About Yarn, and Zoe, who is Pins and Needles UK. And at the retreat there was a little marketplace, so I treated myself to some of Deb's lovely self-striping yarn. And it was a 50g ball, and it came with a 20g contrasting mini in this lovely green colourway. I really enjoy knitting self-striping socks. They're so much fun, aren't they? Just moving from one stripe to the next. It's very satisfying, and these colours, they're just yummy. So I'm really pleased to have those in my sock collection. I knit them, as I tend to do, on 2.25mm needles, and I cast on 64 stitches. I usually do between 12 and 15 rounds for the cuff, 50 rounds for the leg. I put in some sort of heel. In this case I popped in a Fish Lips Kiss heel, and then I knit 67 rounds for the foot, and then just a standard wedge toe. That's the recipe. That tends to fit me quite well. I know a lot of people say they have problems with a short row heel fitting them. I don't. I seem to be able to get away with a short row heel or a heel flap and gusset. I like the fit of both of those types of heels, so I tend to just do what takes my fancy. More often than not, I just find a short row heel a little bit quicker, and the fact that you don't have a gusset means that you're not interrupting your stripe pattern. Sorry, I'm getting a little bit distracted. Newt, my cat, is here. She's rolling around being ever so cute. On to finished object that I have in front of me, number 2, and it's a biggie. I did manage to finish James's Beagle jumper. If you watched the last few days of Vlogmas that I put up, you'll know that the end part of this jumper caused me no end of trouble. But here it is, and it is finished glory. Hopefully you saw all of that. I couldn't see at all what I was showing you. James has worn this every day since he opened it on Christmas Day, so yeah, it's probably looking a bit creased and mangled by now. I'll pop in a couple of pictures of him wearing it. He very graciously stood up here yesterday while I took a couple of photos. So there is a photo of him just standing quite nicely, and then I asked him to strike a catalogue pose, so I'll put both of those in. So the thing that caused me the most problems with this jumper, well, there were a couple of things. The first thing that I had trouble with, you might remember, was this seed stitch panel, this double moss stitch panel at the top of the jumper. The double moss stitch was flaring out quite a lot, So this portion of the jumper ended up sort of coming out at an angle, and it meant that across the shoulders it was just way too wide for him. Sorry, fussing the cat. Try and stay focused. So I had to rip out it was on the back that I noticed this issue. So I ripped out the whole of this part, and I reknit it in a smaller needle size, and that sucked the edges in and solved that issue. But the main problem when it came to finishing were the sleeves. These were such a pain. So I followed the pattern and increased right up to the number of stitches recommended for the size that I was knitting. And I think it was something like you ended with 90 odd stitches. When I sewed that in so the arm gap was basically, you marked the portion at the bottom of the seed stitch panel. It's both sides on the front and back. This garment's knit in pieces and then seamed up. So that was the armhole space, but 90 stitches kind of stretched right down to here if you held it right out. And the problem that I had was I was trying to fit those 90 stitches into the gap that was marked as the sleeve space, and it meant that there was a massive wodge of fabric at the top of the arm here that was just kind of flopping over really unflatteringly. And I was devastated because I had done, well, in my eyes, a pretty good job of mattress seaming the whole garment up. It had taken me nearly the whole day. I was in the shop, so I wasn't sat there just doing it, but it had taken me the whole day on and off to seam this beast up. And then when he tried it on, it just looked ugly. So I was so sad. I was so sad. So I can't remember what I did first. I think I took it out and tried seaming the sleeves, which obviously didn't really do anything. Then I decided that I would rip back the top portion of the sleeve until I got to a number of stitches that kind of fit into this armhole gap nicely, and then knitted up at that stitch count a few more inches to make the sleeves a good length. So that's what I ended up doing, and obviously I had to do that on both sleeves, which kind of negated the effort that I'd gone to of knitting the sleeves two at a time in the first place, which I really don't like. So yeah, I was really not a happy bunny. But in the end, I had a couple of other ideas up my sleeve, pun intended, if that didn't work out. But thankfully, this now looks quite nice. The sleeves in the original pattern are oversized, and I think I have got them to a point where they are nicely oversized and don't just look ill-fitting, which is what they did before. So yeah, that is the story of the Beagle. The only thing that I would change about this now is if I were knitting it again for James, I'd make the neckline a touch higher. He wears basically t-shirts all the time, and the sort of neckline I think would be a little bit nicer if it was slightly higher. But as I say, he's worn it every day since Christmas Day, so I think he likes it. And he's worn it, you know, out of the house in public. So he's not just wearing it around the house to please me. I think the real test will be when he goes back to work next week. If he wears it to work, then I know he really likes it. So, just as a quick reminder, I knit this in Rowan Felted Tweed Aran in colour 745, which was called Ultra, and it's this really nice blue colour with tweedy flecks of sort of a grey and also some orange. And I am pleased to say that I did manage to get it all finished and wrapped up to put under the tree. I did end up working on it a day longer than I anticipated, which also meant that I started my own cast on adventures, which I'll talk about briefly in a minute, a day later than planned. But that's okay, that's okay. It got finished and that's the main thing. So my final finished object are a pair of mitts. And these mitts are part of my cast on frenzy, which I just mentioned. I won't be talking about all of those projects in my works in progress because I have been putting up daily videos about those projects. So if you haven't been watching those videos, just to give you an idea, the concept is, and I started it last year, that I tend to usually have a week or so off at Christmas. So as a little treat to myself, I cast on 12 projects, which I lovingly title the 12 cast-ons of Christmas. And I just get projects on the needles that I have either yarn or pattern for in stash that I've been wanting to cast on and just haven't found the time. And then I'll just work on those projects as and when I have time throughout the year. I have no particular aims or wishes to finish them all within that year. In fact, I have 3 projects still on the needles from last year's 12 cast-ons of Christmas. But they are just things that are for me and I get enjoyment from, so there is no pressure on those projects at all. So I am halfway through my cast-ons for this year, and a couple of days ago I cast on a lovely pair of mittens and I managed to cast them on and cast them off in the same day. So these are the Granby mitts, which is a pattern by the Knox Mountain Yarn Company, I think they're called. I have a project page on Ravelry for them, so you'll be able to hop on over there and have a look if you are interested in finding out for sure. They're just a lovely fingerless mitt with a textured sort of panel up the front and then just plain on the palm. I knit these from some yarn that I purchased when we were in New Zealand, which was in March of 2018, and this yarn is called Amuri, and it is 75% pure New Zealand merino, 25% possum, and the shade number is 2025. It's this gorgeous green colour. It's got sort of shots of sort of a dark grey, black sort of colour through it, and it's absolutely stunning. I love this yarn. I'd knit myself a cowl from it, and I had a 50-gram skein left over, so I decided to make some mitts. I still have some leftovers, but I have plans for these leftovers. So yeah, there's not much to say about these. I knit them on double points, which are not my favourite. I tend to get quite obvious ladders when I knit on DPNs, and you can see down the palm of the hands I have one such ladder. The other joins came in at the side and at the beginning just here, so they're not quite as obvious. I haven't blocked these yet, and I know with a couple of washes and some wear that ladder will become a little bit less obvious, and because it's on the palm of my hands, you know, I don't really mind so much. But with my crazy cast on spate, I was running out of needles. I had no concept that I would cast these on and finish them on the same day, so I thought by knitting them on double points I would save myself a pair of needles basically from my interchangeables. So yeah, but as it turned out I needn't have worried because they were on and off the same day. The rest of my cast-ons, as I say, I'm still in the midst of that adventure, but I'm not going to show them in works in progress. If you're interested, you can pop back and watch the 12 cast-ons of Christmas videos. They're between 6 and 10ish minutes long each, so not a huge time investment, but I will show those on these videos if you don't have time, as we go along and they come back into rotation. Okay, so moving on to works in progress, and I have 4 to show you today. I'll start with my newest cast on, and the newest cast on is living in my moose bag. Not going to say anything more than that about mooses today. And I cast on a lovely pair of socks. The pattern is called Pebbles and Pathways, and it is a design by Mars, who is Hey Brown Berry everywhere on the interwebs. She has a lovely YouTube channel, which I highly recommend that you go and check out if you've not watched her before. She does knitting and spinning and all sorts of crafts, a bit of crochet. So I cast on a pair of Pebbles and Pathways, and I took these with me when I went to visit my family for our little Christmas celebration. Mars has been running a knit along throughout December for the Pebbles and Pathways. I'd kind of hoped that I would get a pair of socks finished in that time, but this is as far as I've got on the first sock. I'm going to blame the Beagle jumper for that. I don't think I mentioned that the Beagle is a pattern by Nora Gorn. It's probably a bit late now, but anyway. So yeah, I'd hoped to get back to these towards the end of December or just before Christmas, and I didn't, so, but never mind. I'm using 2 yarns for these socks. As you can see, they've got a lovely squishy garter stitch panel and some cables, running up the side, and then on the back of the foot, obviously, they're plain. They're toe-up socks, which aren't my favourite, but I thought I would knit to pattern as I was joining in the knit along. So the 2 yarns that I'm using, the contrast colour, which I shall be using for the toe, probably the heel, although it's a heel flap and gusset, but I might do the turn and the flap in this, and also the cuff is this yarn from Wendy, which is Wendy Rome, and this particular colourway is shade 2005 and it's called Grassmere. I think this particular range of colours were inspired by the Lake Districts, which is in the north of England. And the main colour I'm using is Drops Farble, and this is Drops Farble long print, and this is yarn I've had in my stash for a little while, and the colourway is 602, which is this grey toned yarn. I'll show you on the back, that sort of shows you more the sort of dye pattern to the yarn. So yeah, I'm not far off of turning for the heel on that. I'm knitting those on my Chalgu needles, which are probably my favourite sock needles. Again, 2.25mm. Mars's pattern is lovely in that it is very adaptable. I am knitting the sort of my normal 64 stitches, and that is what the pattern recommends, but there are lots of tips on how to adjust the size if you need either a smaller or a larger stitch count. So it's a lovely pattern, well written and pretty easy to follow. And as I say, that is living in my bag from Frog Peak Creations, who is a lovely Canadian maker. While I was battling with the Beagle jumper, I decided to pick up a couple of other projects, 2 of which were part of my 12 cast-ons last year. And I had hoped to maybe get one of them finished, but that just didn't happen. But I picked up, after a long time in the languishing whip pile, my Amulet shawl, which is a pattern by Helen Stewart, who is Curious Handmade Designs. And I'm knitting this from 2 lovely yarns that James bought for me while he was on a work trip to Seattle. Here is my progress on that shawl. When I picked it up, I was part way through this eyelet section, My eyelets are not perfect. There's a few of them on one side, I can't remember which side it is, that don't line up, but yeah, who's going to worry about that? I'm not. The eyelet section actually has some beads in, and those bead rows take forever. But yeah, in the few weeks before Christmas, I managed to knit the remainder of that eyelet section and then the rib section, which took me back to the main colour. And the colours that I'm using in this project are, the orange colour is from the Periwinkle Sheep, and that is in the Clementine colourway, and that is a 75-25 superwash merino nylon blend. And the variegated colour, which I love, is from Dye House Yarns, which I believe was the in-house yarn for the shop that he went to, which was called Serial Knitters in Seattle. And this was in the Eclipse colourway, and it was a special colourway that they'd made for the solar eclipse that had happened not long before James visited. And this one is 100% superwash merino. And I just love this sort of top part of the shawl. Have you ever seen those kind of time-lapse pictures of the night sky where the stars sort of make a swirling pattern in the sky? It just kind of reminds me of that. So yeah, I had I think maybe a day or two. Actually, I do remember it was on the Sunday before Christmas. I started the final section, which will be back to the orange and is in a nice lace pattern with some beads. And I'd knit a couple of rows, but I'd gone completely wrong somewhere. So I ripped back what I'd done and just put it away, because I knew I wouldn't be able to concentrate on that while we had visitors. I think what I need to do is just double check my stitch count, because I have a feeling that I might be just 1 or 2 stitches off in this rib section, and that is what's putting me off in the next section. I decided, so for this section here, I was using the crochet hook method of popping on the beads, and that's quite slow. So for the next section, I have actually already strung my beads onto my yarn, and I'm going to see if that is any quicker. I'm using some Miyuki beads. I don't know, I'm not really much of a beader, so I have no idea whether I'm pronouncing that right. So these are matte topaz beads, and they come in these tubes. These are a size 6 seed beads, and I believe that means you get 6 beads to an inch. I believe that's how the sizings go. So the smaller your number, the bigger the bead. I was using this, I don't know if you can see it, look, teeny tiny crochet hook, which is a 1mm crochet hook to pop those on. I've got this much left of the Dye House Eclipse yarn, and I don't need to go back to that yarn. I was kind of thinking, oh, maybe I could get some socks from the leftovers of these two, but this is 100% merino, so I'm not sure if that is a good idea. So I don't think this is going to take much effort. I reckon 2 or 3 evenings worth of knitting to get that final section done. So this is probably the project that I'm going to go back to first, once I have finished my cast on madness. That is living in one of my own project bags. This is one of the first project bags that I made, I think. I've got my label on the outside, which I don't do anymore. They all go inside. And this fabric was some vintage fabric from my grand's stash. I managed to get my hands on a couple of pieces of fabric from her stash when she passed away. So this fabric is very special to me. My next work in progress is another one which was part of my 12 cast-ons of Christmas last year, and this is my Dern jumper. Again, I decided in December to get this project back out. I've been languishing for a little while and I needed to cast on the front piece, and the fact that I hadn't cast on meant that I hadn't worked on it. So I managed to get the front piece cast on, and as you can see, I've knit the rib and I've started on the stockinette portion. And this is a plain jumper. I've already knit the back and the sleeve. I've shown this a few times on the podcast before, but I don't think I've shown this back piece. I may have shown it in Vlogmas. This is now straight backwards and forwards knitting for quite a few inches. It's going to be fairly slow going. It's a fingering weight 4-ply yarn. It's Rowan Valley Tweed in this lovely rusty orange colourway. But this will make perfect cinema knitting, I think. I like to think that this won't be many more months in the making. There's probably not much else to say about that project for now, but I wanted to show it to you because that front piece had been started, and I'm keeping that in another one of my own project bags, which is this lovely oyster catcher fabric from a designer here in the UK called Poppy Treefy. She's based down in Cornwall and she makes some lovely things. Now, final project, which this is a project that I'm so excited about. It's my Darumi jumper. If you remember when I last recorded a video like this, I had knit, this is a pattern by Isabel Kramer, I'll show you, it's on the front of Pom Pom magazine, and I had knit down to where the sleeves split, but I was very unhappy with my increases in the top section of this yoke. I thought they looked very untidy. So I messed around with a few different increases. Thank you to some lovely suggestions from some people that view the channel here, and experimented with that, and I changed it up and I got to something that I was much happier with. So I ripped it all back and started again. And in the last video, which I put up on the 30th of November, I had re-knit this neckband, which is basically a folded neckband. So you knit up and put in this contrast stripe, and then you knit down and then you catch the band inside, so there's no sort of ribbing as such. But I have made quite a bit of progress on this. As you can see, I have re-knit the yoke and I am a significant way down the body. I think I'm just over halfway down from the sleeve split. I needed to go to about 14 inches and I've done about 8. I love working on this project. It is pretty mindless. Obviously the colour work section is done. That was the interesting part. It's now just round and round and round stockinette stitch. I had one day over the Christmas period, I think it was Boxing Day, where I had a bit of a migraine and I didn't want to cast on anything, which put me back another day for my 12 cast ons. But by the evening time I'd started to feel a little bit better, so I decided to pick this up and just knit round and round. We had one evening where we played a few games of cards, so I was knitting on this while we were playing cards as well. And I just kind of pick this up and do a row or two any chance I get, which, yeah, as I say, I mean, it's for something that's not very exciting. I really want this finished jumper. I think it's looking lovely so far. I'm much happier with the increases in the top, and I think it will be really lovely and snuggly to wear. There's still quite a lot of making to do though. Obviously I've got another 6 or so inches to knit on the body, then I have to do some ribbing, then I have to do the sleeves. So it's a long way off yet, but my yarn seems to be going quite far. For the 2 blues at the top, I used some more of this yarn, which is the West Yorkshire Spinners Wensleydale Gems, in 2 different blue colourways. One of them is Topaz, and I can't remember what the other one is called. I do apologise, but I do have a project page for this over on Ravelry. So I used nearly a whole skein for the blue, and then I used some leftovers. Actually, these were some leftovers from a shawl that I knit for one of my customers, and she just said that I could keep the leftover colours because she didn't have a use for them. So those were the two blues, and then this lovely grey is just a farm yarn from a company called Wooltops here in the UK, and I picked up several skeins of this grey yarn from their booth at Wonderwool this year. I think I picked up, I think it was a bargain, it was like 6 skeins for like 15 quid or 20 quid, something like that. 6 100 gram skeins, and it's a lovely sort of heathered grey colour. These are the first 2 skeins that I wound up, and I'm a good way through the body, so I'm going to have more than enough yarn. I'm thinking maybe 1 more skein for the sleeves, and I might go into maybe 1 skein to finish off the body, depends. So yeah, I reckon I'll have at least 1 skein left over. I knit the top of the garment to a few rows past the colour work on a slightly larger size needle, maybe a 4.5 or a 4, and then I've changed down to whatever I've got on there now for the rest of the body, and that seems to have worked quite well for the sort of sizing, and you can tell the difference somewhat between the stitches up here and the stitches down here, but I think once I've got that on, it won't be noticeable, and going up a size in needle always helps colour work, so, which naturally tends to be a little bit tighter for most people. So yeah, I think that's everything to say about the Darumi. I'm really happy with my progress on that, considering I've managed to do that all in a month. Yeah, something to be said about round and round stocking it. I know it's not always the most enjoyable, but sometimes you need that mindless knitting. And that is living in yet another one of my own project bags. So that is everything that I wanted to talk about, show you, for finished objects and works in progress. I'm going to talk to you just for a couple of minutes about my plans for 2019, because that just seems to be a thing that people do at this time of year. I have a lot of projects on the needles, and by the end of this week I will have even more. I worked out that by the end of my 12 cast-ons madness, I will have around about 30 works in progress, which I know will probably scare the living daylights out of some of you. I am not someone who tends to get overwhelmed by the amount of projects on the needles. I enjoy knitting and crocheting and spinning, and I just do this for fun. I do it for me. Obviously it has morphed also into my current work life, but I try to keep my home knitting, my knitting for me, and shop knitting somewhat separate. And that's why these things tend to take me so long, is because I have certain projects that I work on at home in the evenings, just when I have time. And I don't apologise, I have no qualms for the amount of projects that I have on the needles. I could probably cast on another 100 projects from the yarn that I have in stash, and still have some more left to cast on. That being said, it would be nice to work through some of my whips this year. So with that in mind, I have a tentative plan. Actually, I've got 3 sort of plans to talk to you about. Number 1 is I will be joining in with Emma of Eldenwood Craft. She is doing a Make 9 along again in 2019. She did one last year and I failed miserably. I was kind of only unofficially participating in that. I didn't really join in any of the chatter in her group or anything like that. But my Make 9 went out the window fairly quickly in 2018. But this year her Make Along's a little bit different in that you choose 9 types of things to do or to make, rather than 9 specific projects. So I'm going to be joining in that Make Along, but I think I'm going to do a separate video to talk to you about what I want to make for that Make Along. I also have, and I might need to push you back for this, I have a tote that I came across in my cupboard full of commercial sock yarn. I don't know about you, but I find that it's really easy to collect these balls. My collection has kind of grown through various means. Firstly, I often, if I have ordered yarn online in the past few years and got close to that magic number where they give you free shipping, I have tended to shove a ball of sock yarn into my basket to get me over that free shipping limit rather than have to pay money for postage. So I have acquired several balls of yarn that way. Also, if I have been travelling around and go to a local yarn shop and enjoy the experience of visiting that shop, but maybe the yarn that they have is not necessarily talking to me, then in order to support that shop, it can be quite nice just to pick up a ball of sock yarn, because you know at some point you'll get through it. So I have been inspired to try and knit through the majority of my commercial sock yarn. Maria Samira on Instagram showed a picture of 12 bags of yarn that she had packaged up. So she put yarn in 12 paper bags, and the idea would be that she'd just pick a bag out and knit through that yarn. So I think if I package these up into 12 bags, that will get through the majority of what's in this tote. So that is something that I plan to do this year. And then the third plan is to try and work through some of my whips. And I'm using this lovely notebook that I got in the goodie bag from the Knit Tea Retreat. And this was a gift from Emma of Eldenwood Craft again. And I'm hoping this will help keep me on track and keep me thinking about my whips. So I've started to use this to plan, which is a really simple plan, and I'm going to alternate. So I'm going to alternate between weeks where I work on anything I want. So they're my anything goes weeks. Today is New Year's Eve, and it's Monday, so I figured this would be a good place to start week 1. So this week my anything goes is to finish my 12 cast-ons, and then next week I'll be working on my oldest projects, and I'm hoping to regularly do knitting, crochet and spinning. So I have just basically written those 3 things out, and then I'm going to try and concentrate on one project in each of those categories. And then I shall go back to the next week where anything goes. Again, I want to make sure that I'm knitting, spinning and crocheting. But I will give myself permission to work on anything that I want, not just my oldest projects in that week. So that could be going back to a project that I'm really excited to work on for my 12 cast-ons. It could be I want to cast on something new. Hopefully my urge to cast on is going to be mostly satisfied by this crazy couple of weeks. At the back of this book I have made a list of my oldest projects, so both for knitting and for crochet. So actually my oldest project, but knitting wise, is that amulet shawl. So next week when I get to go back to these, I want to make sure that I'm working on something. I'm not going to say, I'm not going to be super strict with myself, because I know I won't stick to things like that, but I'm going to try and work on something from the top 3 in my list, and obviously I'll tick these off as I go along and start working down the list. On the crochet side, I've got a couple of blankets, a garment, a toy, and then Blake, which is a lovely project from the Edwards Menagerie book that I've cast on for my 12 cast-ons this year, is on this list. So as you can see, I don't have huge amounts of crochet on the hook anyway. I haven't listed my spinning. Basically my spindles are full and they're all pretty much the same in terms of how long I've been working on them, so as long as I'm working on something spinning wise, I'm not going to worry too much about that. So yeah, that is kind of my plan for 2019. I'm trying to keep it fairly broad, because I know in the past where I've set myself specific targets, it just doesn't happen. Our sort of tastes and wants change as time goes on, and brand new shiny projects and patterns come out that we just need to cast on. So having a super prescriptive list just doesn't really work for me. But I'm hoping that this kind of system, where it's fairly sort of fluid and loose, will help me work through some of my whips, but also give me permission to have the freedom to work on what I want as well. I guess time will tell whether that system works for me or not, but I'm sure I will report back throughout the year. It just remains for me to say a big thank you for joining me. I wish you all out there a very happy, healthy, productive 2019, and until next time, great big woolly hugs to you all. Bye for now.